Hi, so what I'd like to show you today is how to manage versions using Claudiajs for your projects in creating AWS Lambda functions. A couple of prerequisites for this. The first thing is that you should already have installed the AWS command line utilities, and you should have Node.js installed. Um, Look at the README file for this project for links and instructions on how to do that if you haven't already. So the first thing I'm going to do is to get a terminal prompt, command prompt, and cd into a Hello World kind of template project that I created. And then once you're in that directory, the first thing you want to do is npm install the dependencies for the project. The next thing we're going to do is run an npm script that is referenced in the package.json called create. So npm run create. And what this is going to do is to create the initial development version of this Lambda and push it out to AWS. Okay, so you see that this executed successfully. The name of the Lambda is Hello World, and you'll notice here there's a URL that you can use to actually take a look at that. So if we take that URL, paste it here, the only thing we would like to add to this is the endpoint, which is called hello. So /hello. And you'll see that it's printing out hello world. So our Lambda, at least the development version at this point, is pushed out to AWS and is available to the world. So let's talk about versioning for Lambdas at this point. So Lambda versioning is maybe a little different than what you might be used to with GitHub, where you might create a production branch or a master branch, and then also have a staging or a testing branch as you develop things. For Lambdas, what happens is you have basically a single trunk, and every time you create or update the Lambda function, it increments a version by one. So you start out, at this point, we have a version 1 of our Lambda. If we make any changes to it subsequent to this and update it, it will increment to version 2. So the trick here is how do you associate these versions with development or deployment environments, like being able to signify that one of those version numbers is the current production version and one is the development or testing or staging version. So the way this is done with AWS Lambdas is to use what they call aliases that are kind of like tags that attach to these version numbers. So I created a script that you can run from npm to see what the current version is. So let's do that now, and what we're going to do here is npm run and call dev, and let's take a look at the output here. So what you'll see here, if you look at the body of the response, which is this section right here, not hugely readable, but you can see that the name of the function is hello world, the version is 1, and the stage or deployment environment currently is set to dev. And conveniently, you can also call this in your browser or using curl. And so I took that same URL that we used previously and I just added another endpoint here called call. And you can see here it's spitting out the same thing in the body of the response, hello world version number 1, and the stage is development. Next, let's imagine that this is already tested and we're ready to push this out to a production release. So again, we have another npm script that we can run here. This one would be npm run deploy prod. So what this is going to do is indicate that the current release, which we're on release version 1, is also going to be marked as the production release. Okay, so we see that pushed out. Let's just take another look in the browser so you can see. Here we're going to change this to prod/hello. So let's make sure that it actually works. Sometimes the Lambda function takes a minute to kind of come to life. So if you just refresh a couple times, if you get one of those forbidden error messages, try it a couple more times in the refresh, and you can see here that we are now calling hello world. And likewise, let's just take a look and see what's considered the prod version now. So we're going to issue a call request again. And you can see here in this particular case, the version hasn't incremented because all we indicated here is that version 1 should be the prod version. And then you'll also see that prod and dev currently are sharing the same version, which is a little weird, but that's how it works currently. So they're both in sync right now. I also would like to show you kind of the same information that you would see if you were in the AWS console. You don't have to be, but I just want to demonstrate that all the same information is reflected here for the Lambda as well. So I'm going to go into Lambdas. Next, I'm going to pick the Hello World Lambda that we just pushed out. And if you notice here, there's a pull-down menu option here called Qualifiers. And this is where you're going to see the versions and the aliases that we just created. So if you click on the versions, you'll see that dev and prod are both attached to version 1, and then the aliases, it's kind of the same information, just displayed in a different manner. So we have dev attached to version 1, prod attached to version 1. Now I'd like to demonstrate or kind of simulate a typical development cycle. So let's say that we're adding a new feature to this function. And what I just did is I added a little bit different text for the function hello. And I saved that file that's in the lambda.js file if you look at this template project that I created. So I saved it. Now all I need to do at this point is deploy it to dev. So again, I'm going to call npm run deploy dev. And it's updating this new version. And you can see here, it does indicate that now we have a new version 2. Same function. Let's pop over to the browser and just take a look at what's happened at this point. So let's do a dev hello. And you can see I'm adding a new feature, so this looks different. Let's just double check that we haven't done anything destructive to the production version that's being used by customers, for example. And you see that we haven't. This is still hello world. It's the production version of it. And you'll see also, if we do a call, that's still version 1. But if we look at dev, you'll see now that we're at version 2. So we have 2 versions. The production version is attached to 1, and the one that I'm experimenting with or adding a new feature or doing a bug fix for is currently set to version 2. So let's say that we fully tested this new feature branch, or it's actually not a branch, a new feature, and we're ready to move it to production. Again, we're going to do the same thing that we did with the initial create, which is do an npm run deploy prod. And just like before, the prod and the dev versions are now going to be in sync, so they're both going to be attached to version 2. And just to make sure, let's go back and just double check here. So dev is still attached to version 2. And let's see if we updated prod in terms of versions. We did. Let's call the endpoint just to make sure that also updated. Yes, it did, adding a new feature. So that in a nutshell is how you would both create kind of the initial version, both dev and prod version for your function, and then later on how you would update it by either adding a new feature or fixing a bug or something.